Hi, I'm Lynn.
And I'm Amanda, and this is the Pursuit of Badasserie, the podcast.
This podcast is all about taking action and creating that badass business abundance and life that you want.
Where we share stories, laughs, wins, and epic fails to show you the whole picture of the entrepreneurial journey.
It's not just unicorns and rainbows, people.
Jump on and follow us through this raw and witty roller coaster,
where we get down and dirty and go behind the scenes of life and entrepreneurship.
Get on it,
get over it,
and get after it.
Hey, I'm Lynn.
And I'm Amanda. Welcome to the Pursuit of Badasserie, the podcast season 2. What? We are officially in our second season of our podcast. We are so excited, as usual. I know we need to look up a thesaurus of other words besides excited. Stoked. Until we always use those words. However, it doesn't change the fact that we are those things in the second season of our podcast. This is our 1-year podcast-iversary.
That's right. Can you believe it's been a year? It's insane how quick time goes past.
I know. I mean, I know people say, like, you look at your kid and you realize that time goes so fast. And the podcast is now one of our children because it has gone by so fast. I can't believe it's a year. I can't believe it. I don't even think to me, it feels like 2 months. Maybe. Yeah. It just went so fast.
It really, really did. And what a year it's been. We've released 2 books in this year. I mean, we're pretty much just had released July, made 1 year for our first book and then our second book. And then all of these podcasts where we originally started off every other week. And then about midpoint, we went to weekly, which is insane.
Yeah. You know, and I don't even remember maybe you remember the exact reason why we switched over, but I think that it was sort of that, if I remember correctly, because again, it was a year ago, but also 5 seconds ago, that with the second book coming out, we just had so much to talk about. And we realized that doing these podcasts every other week, although we're great, we could literally talk forever. So I think that we just needed more time to talk about it, more time to talk about sales and do our sales series, more time to talk about entrepreneurship in general and all the things that come with that. And I just don't think we could do it every other week. There's just too much to cover. I mean, if we did it every other week, I think we'd have to do this for the next 50 years to get half our information out.
Oh, absolutely. And there are times where, and yes, it's all of those points. And if I have my entrepreneurial hat on, and this is probably something we should or should not admit, but we also want to monetize this. Eventually, we're going to start monetizing our podcast, which is a smart business move for those of us doing podcasts. To be able to monetize it in different ways. So that it was all of that and a smart business move for us. So it's really interesting. Actually, at the time of this recording, we're at 34 podcasts posted. So by the time this comes out, we're going to be close to 40. If not at 40 podcasts posted, which is just mind blowing to me. And we've had some great individuals as on our podcast to interview, but also the content that we have thrown out there. I just go back sometimes and like re-listen when I'm working out or because I travel a lot, like listening while I'm traveling or laying by the pool, which I don't get to do that often. And I still take little nuggets, and it was us who were actually doing the conversation. And I'm like, oh, that was great. I was like, oh, dang, we did say that. Oh, good job.
Yeah, I do the same thing when I reread our book. I'm like, look at that. Look how good we are. I mean, I know it's like toot your own horn, and you're right about that. Looking back, because sometimes when I'm trying to think of new topics to cover, I'll go back and look at our previous episodes and be like, oh my God, we talked about that too. And we talked about this and we talked about that. And we really have covered a lot of ground, not just covering some of the topics that we talked about in our first and second books, but just, stuff on leadership, on marketing, on sales, on just growth as an entrepreneur, on imposter syndrome and perfectionism and all the little things that make up the day-to-day, everyday norm of being a business owner and an entrepreneur. I'm so I'm impressed with us that we got that much done in less than a year. Well, I guess it's been a year now, and a year. And then we still have a list a mile long from a data dump of more podcasts to do. And that's already like, we basically already filled up next year in ideas. Oh my gosh, we're going to have to go like daily podcasts.
Could you imagine?
No. Okay, I want to clear up with the audience now. We're not doing podcasts unless we hire a couple of sound people and other marketers as well. I mean, I'm not saying never say never. However, it is not happening in this month, at least. I will not be heading that up. I will hire if it comes to that.
Yeah. For those of you who don't know, we do have a team of individuals, and especially our main VA, who is our ride or die, helps us with marketing materials and stuff. But Amanda, because she has a background and a bit of a control freak, if you haven't gotten that, I've tried to get her to get off of it, but she still does like all of our editing. And I know it's like mindless in a way, like it does take effort, but it's also like a soothing, mindless thing that you can do versus really having to think about it. And I know that also the control aspect of it, which I'm not mad. I'm a control freak too, recovering-ish, trying to be. But yeah, so it's a lot of work goes behind the scenes for those of you who don't do a podcast to like get it ready and finding the people who we're going to interview, which was really an interesting discussion that we had as well, because we were only doing it ourselves, and even like bringing people on, which we can talk about in a second, but kudos to you, Amanda. Like, you're killing it.
Thanks. And it is, yes, it is very much control, but also it is kind of cathartic for me in a way to just, it's like zoning out in front of the television, except it's productive. So I can zone out on a podcast and edit the whole thing and then do the show notes or whatever. And it takes very little mental capacity to do it because I have this background in television production, and, I know about that. I have the software already, so it's not hard for me to do. So it is very mindless. It is time consuming, but not difficult. So but yes, it's definitely a bit of a control thing. If we went to more times, I would have to hire somebody, not because I want to necessarily, or I don't have the capacity, but because I have other jobs and things that require my attention. Sleep, I suppose, maybe next year.
Who needs sleep?
I know luckily, I don't actually need a lot of sleep, which helps me immensely in all of this. However, I probably should sleep a little. I've been told that maybe I'm slightly nicer and more patient when I've slept more than 3 hours, whatever.
By your 5-year-old or by adults?
Both. I'm not sure he's actually understood that is the reason why mommy isn't, but I think he knows that if I need a third cup of coffee, that it's going to be a rougher day. So he knows without knowing that that's the reason. I think he thinks I go to bed when he goes to bed. No, I do not get 12 hours of sleep. Small human. I do not.
No. So we decided about midpoint to start bringing people onto our podcast. What do you remember about that? And how do you feel about actually doing interviews? Because we have about, I don't know, maybe 50-50 at this point, interviews and not.
I think once we were really doing the interviews, I think I missed doing just you and I, because you and I could talk. Probably it's a bit of a control thing, but I know what you're going to say. I mean, I don't know what you're going to say, but if you said something that threw me off, I would be excited and happy about it and not like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? And not that that's happened at this point, but in the process of finding people, I know my first, it's not even a hesitation so much as difficulty that I found was time zones, because and I say that a lot because I really struggle. Okay. I will readily admit I am good with money. I'm not good with math. Those are very separate things. It's like I'm good with fitness, but not nutrition. They're separate things. So Lynn is obviously in Thailand. I'm in Texas. I'm in Central Time Zone. We both have clients internationally who are in Europe, who are in Australia. We have all over the place. And then of course, all throughout the United States. And so I always feel like I'm trying to do math as what time zone. And when we were arranging to do podcasts, I was always kind of like, where is this person located? What time zone is that? Do I need a babysitter? Am I going to be awake? Like, am I going to be up at like 3 a.m.? So I think that was my biggest concern, is because we have such an international audience, because aren't we like top 10 of podcasts and
Yeah, we hit the top 10 in Bangkok.
Yeah.
Or in Thailand.
In Thailand.
I think it might be Southeast Asia.
Yeah, I think we're top 10 in Southeast Asia. So we have an international audience. So it's really, I think that was what really threw me at first, was feeling like I wasn't sure we would have the bandwidth between our schedules and our client schedules and my inability to do math to do all of those interviews. But surprisingly, it's been okay. I haven't really been thrown off too often. I'm really
But our interviewees have been, and it still kind of blows my mind because I've been doing this for so long, and I understand. I understand going down the rabbit hole, and sometimes I all of a sudden I'm like, what time zone is it? Where am I at? Like, who's what?
Or daylight savings ruining my life.
Daylight savings, we hate you. Back to the subject is that our actual interviewees have had some issues. And so that's really interesting, even though we tell people like, hey, make sure you're checking your time. It's connected to the Google Calendar too. So it should pop up in the Google Calendar. We know not everybody's Google fans. So all of that stuff, it's really interesting to watch others navigate that as well, which I've found quite, I won't say comical and haha, look at them, but comical as in, oh, geez, this is like still a thing. Like people still have a hard time with time zones and not actually reading. And that's really been a reflection on me, because I like skim things really quickly and I'm like, ooh, I can't be mad at them because I do the same thing. I don't always pay attention to everything. So, but we've had some really great guests, and I'm really excited about season 2, which we'll talk about in another episode. But yeah, I would say having it's interesting that you say that, like, obviously we know each other, and we have good banter too. And we like understand, the direction that each other is going, but we also play off of each other really well. And I know that that was one thing, like starting to bring guests on, and really because in our second book, we had 4 individuals, Ian, Greg, Karen, and Graham, who did a small interview in our book. And that really kind of like propelled us to say, why don't we do this on the podcast? And we've had several of them on the podcast. I think we only have not had one individual, which we need to get her on the podcast. But I know that kind of pushed us into it. And I've really enjoyed it. I've really enjoyed like learning from different people, seeing other perspectives. I think that it's an interesting thing to navigate, to have other individuals on, but I also miss us because we were like hardcore for about a month, where we just did all of the interviews in 1 month. And so we had none that we were doing ourselves. And I did miss that individual podcast with just us.
Yeah. But we've had some really, really interesting people on the podcast. And I mean, I've subscribed to almost all, I think those who have newsletters I have subscribed to, and they have such great content and such great information to give out. And we talk about this all the time, that it's the importance of lifetime learning. And I feel like this podcast has given me a legitimate excuse to do more of that, because I know when you're in your entrepreneurial like grind, you kind of put yourself on the back burner. But now every time I'm quote unquote forced to interact with other businesses and to learn more and to do that, it's so beneficial for me. And I get off these podcast interviews and I'm so motivated to do the thing. So it's like, okay. And I've actually started allotting time after these interviews to do specific work to what they're talking about, because you're just in that like inspiration moment. And I'm hoping that that's how people feel after they listen to the podcast, because that's how I feel after I'm interviewing these people. I want to go and implement their suggestions right away, because like that's the whole point, is to get inspired and to get new ideas and to generate that, even for people who we agree with, who have similar ideas to ours. There's always a different way to say it or spin it that just clicks and makes that aha moment that makes the brain start moving and shaking and thinking in a different way. And that has been so great from a development standpoint for me, is oh no, I'm forced to enrich myself every week. Oh, sad. So it's been great for that.
I agree. I agree 100%. I love that you said that. Actually, I just took a note because I'm have a workshop coming up, and that is one thing that we've spoke a lot about when off air, about that little bit of flex time after you have an event, after you read something, after you participate in something, so that way you can implement, speed of implementation, right? Like diving right in. I love that you said that. It's a great reminder, and that will definitely be in my workshop. And I really, yeah, it's been really cool to see the diversity of the individuals too, to kind of like ping different ideas, even if we didn't agree. Like there's been some people on the podcast and they have great content. It's just not in alignment with like who I am. And I don't know about you. And it's still, though, it's still pushed me to say, okay, why am I not in alignment? Because we're not a one size fits all. And how can I improve what I am in alignment with? Right. So making sure that I am strengthening my message or strengthening that aspect because of, what we discuss on the call. And I think that that's brilliant about, especially I'm an Audible. I love visual as well, but reading, I'm the one who listens to Audible books, and versus like I will read a book, but with the podcast, like I can pop it in and just on my walks, because I walk everywhere, and just like listen and be inspired, or just really have some critical thinking time to be able to process through things. And it's been really brilliant for me. And I also love that they're bite-sized, even though sometimes I'm like, dang, I wish I had more time with them. I wish I had more time with them. I wish I had more time with them.
Yes, I definitely feel, well, I'm sure it's quite obvious. Lynn and I could talk about everything forever. And there are definitely interviews where I felt like you and I noticed that we were over time and we're like, oh, crap. We had so much more to say and so many more questions to ask. However, we wanted to honor everyone's time and cut it short. But there have definitely been several of the interviews that I feel like we should either have them on again, or I could have gone over and through it a million times, because there's just, I love learning and I love feeding off other entrepreneurs and their energy and what they've been doing. And it's so good for other entrepreneurs to talk to other entrepreneurs. I mean, we talk about this, like having your team and having people you can, because being an entrepreneur is a lonely road, but in these podcasts, I feel like I've been able to connect with so many different entrepreneurs and business owners who we have still been talking to and still collaborating with even after our podcast. So I just feel like there's that opportunity to really connect and to grow together. Like we all go up together. So it's been fantastic.
Absolutely. Well, one of the things that have come out of the podcast is our 5-day sales master series that's been free. And we've been having a lot of, not everybody on the 5-day master series, which is every other month. The next one will be in
right now.
Well, right now. Yeah.
Because tomorrow, I guess.
Week of August.
By the time that when this comes out, it is being recorded before, when this comes out, tomorrow, or no, during this whole thing, like right now, there's a 5-day master series. So I'll actually put the link in our show notes today if you want to hop on late, if you're just now hearing about it.
Yeah, but the next one will be in October right now. But that kind of was birthed out of this because we were like, there's so much more that we can talk about, and more in an action-oriented, applicable way, because we're very action-oriented individuals. And that's really one of the reasons why the 5-day master series, sales master series, and right now it's sales, it may change over the course of time, but sales is such an instrumental part that we don't pay enough attention to, that probably not, but I love that. So is there one podcast or one moment that really stood out to you?
Oh man, one moment.
Or you can just say some of the things that stood out to you, or some of the podcasts that really like resonated with you.
I feel like the only thing that is in my head right now is that song, For a Moment Like This. Wait a light. That's literally what's going through my head right now. If I had to pick a moment, this is not necessarily a like positive. However, I have listened to the evolution of our interview series, And it's very interesting to see how you and I interacted and handled interviews that were like our first, second, third interview versus like, I don't know how many we're in now, 20th interview. They're very different. So if anybody wants to go back and just like have a good laugh, go back to the first like 4 or 5 and just look at my face and see how much RBF I have going on, because we had just started like using video, and obviously it's on YouTube for those of you who are listening and haven't watched it on YouTube, so you can see us. And some of my facial expressions, or like, you know, my kid would come in. So there's a lot of funny things that I wasn't expecting, but I feel like going back and watching some of those, it's been pretty funny to me.
Yeah, I would say that. And also listening to some of them. So because of the time zone difference, Amanda and I are typically recording these Bangkok morning and in the evening there. And sometimes a lot of times we batch our podcast. So today, this is our second one that we are actually recording, and we're going to record one more after this. We did an interview first. So just a little behind the scenes for you. But I noticed that I have morning voice, even though I am always up earlier, and I don't understand. So now that I've been like paying attention, I'm literally talking to myself. I mean, I talk to myself all the time, but I'm talking to myself out loud and doing the me type of things to like warm up my voice. Cause I'm like, what the hell? I have a morning voice. That sucks. I think sometimes maybe I might be hungover, or not that I drink that often, but I'm sure there's been a podcast or two where didn't make the best decisions the night before, or that I was up super early or up way later than what I should have been. But that's one thing that's cracked me up. But we've had some great topics that have been really, that we're really passionate about. And that's interesting too. I can really see, you know, where we are in the zone. And I hate to say this, and I am being judgy, but there are times where we are just like in the zone and on top of it and on fire, and like that topic. And this doesn't mean the other topics we weren't passionate about, but we just weren't maybe as connected in that moment versus some of the other ones where it is like, I could feel the energy from it. You know what I mean? And all great topics, but definitely.
Yeah. I mean, I always feel like I should write like a behind the scenes journal of what I was doing the day before, like the day of that podcast, because there's sometimes I look at the video, I'm like, whoo, I know that was a tough day because I look real tired right there. And I think it's really funny because if I look back, I'm like, oh yeah, that's the day I had like 57 things to do. And then my kid had a meltdown, and it's really, it's like a little time capsule into my, and I really should write behind the scenes, like, here's what we did in the last 24 hours before recording this. So you can understand why Lynn has her sassy 1-900 morning voice and I have, you know, bags under my eyes and look like I need a stiff drink. This is why, this is what happened that day. So it's been interesting to see that for sure.
Absolutely. We've had some really great bloopers as well. We've definitely had some moments where we've laughed so hard we've cried.
I should make a bloopers reel in all my spare time.
Oh, one of these days. Well, we are at time. We didn't even start this by saying we appreciate all of you, because if it was not, I mean, obviously Amanda and I love talking to each other, and recording it. It's just like wonderful. However, we wouldn't be ranking. We wouldn't, you know, this wouldn't be for everything that it is if we didn't have an audience. So thank you so much. We get countless messages and comments and even suggestions. Keep the suggestions coming. We would love to talk about certain topics or revisit a topic. Absolutely. Yeah, we are just so appreciative of all of you and your support. And even those of you that have given maybe some not so nice comments, it gives us the ability to reflect. I mean, some of you are just jerks. Just some people are jerks, but that's okay. It gives us the ability, we're jerks too. It gives us the ability to reflect on, do we need to make a change? Do we need to step up or whatever? But we are loving it. We want you to continue to listen. We want you to continue to subscribe and share and send it to other people. Yeah. And if you actually know of a great person to be on our podcast, message us. We would love to, we're definitely back in the interviewing season. We're going to interview a lot of people this next season, which we'll talk about in the next podcast. So, but thank you.
Yes. I can't believe we didn't start with that. So sorry, but thank you so much. We couldn't do what we do without you. And we just very much appreciate you and everything you have brought to our lives and obviously the podcast.
Absolutely. So be on the lookout. We're going to have some great things coming up this next season. We'll talk about it in the next podcast, but thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Amanda.
Get after it.
All right, everyone. It's not enough to just listen.
Now you've got to put it into action.
We are so excited to see what you do next.
If you enjoyed our show, please leave us a review on iTunes.
And to find out more about what we're doing, visit us at thepursuitofbadasserie.com.